Good afternoon, everybody out there. I want to welcome you to our last STEM talk for the 2020-2021 academic year. It has been a long one, but I am also glad we're able to maintain some of the activities that we used to be able to do in a room all together, even though we're all living our lives virtually. The STEM talks are brought to Clackamas Community College as work that's done through the STEM EFA, STEM Educational Focus Area. So a lot of you students that are out there are probably a part of that educational focus area, or it might be something that you are thinking about right now. The other groups that help put this talk together are the STEM Club. So Eric Lee, who is also part of this call, helps organize the STEM Club. So if this talk gets you thinking about STEM careers and how that looks for you, I would definitely encourage that you look into the STEM Club and think about joining for next school year. The other groups are the STEM Workforce. So that's all of the faculty that help organize STEM activities around campus, and also the Build Exito program. It's a program that is a collaboration between Clackamas Community College and Portland State University, and it is designed to help get more underrepresented groups into the biomedical research career path. So with that, I am going to hand off our presentation for today to Hussein, who works at Intel, and I'm going to let him walk us through the panelists and go ahead and take over the panel for us. So thanks, Hussein.
Thanks, Tori. Hey everyone, looking forward to being here. It's great to be here. My name is Hussein. I am an employee at Intel, and I thought this was a fantastic opportunity for us to work with Clackamas Community College again. Some of my other partners within the organization that we're representing, the Next Technologist, Alex Berry in particular, has worked with Clackamas in the past, and he mentioned that it was an incredibly vibrant group of students in the past. So I'm looking forward to being here, and I'm excited, and hopefully we answer all of your questions and leave you with some great insights for your careers moving forward. So I wanted to start us off with a brief overview of who we all are and where we're coming from. So we can take a few minutes to go through that. We have a pretty sizable panel today. With people from diverse backgrounds who've all had unique experiences on their journey into Intel. Let's go ahead and get us started. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll start with myself. I am Hussein. I'm the moderator for today's discussion. My hometown's in New Jersey, East Brunswick. That's where I am right now. I would be in Portland, but COVID messed up those plans for now. I plan on moving there eventually at some point in the next year or so. I studied supply chain management in college, and I went to Rutgers University for my bachelor's degree. So I spent my 4 years there, and I ended up as a commodity manager for my first full-time job out of college at Intel, after previously interning at Intel the summer of my junior year. In terms of career advice that I would say I wish I had in college, people have spoken about it briefly here and there in the past, but there hasn't been, in my opinion, much of a focus on continuous development of skills post-graduation, right? We're taught, in my opinion, everything that we need to do to get our first job. But from there, we often forget that the learning never stops. It's a continuous journey from role to role, career path to career path. And depending on what it is that you're seeking in your career, it's important that you take on a lifelong learner mindset. So I'd advise you to take that into consideration and take that as a key learning, at least from me today. So feel free to ask me either during the call or post-call, connect with me after on social media, etc., about internships, full-time recruiting. I've helped quite a few of my friends with salary negotiations and things like that. And then overall, just things outside of career, right? Working, traveling, etc. So pleasure to be here. I am not sure that Alex has joined the call yet, but he is my partner within the Next Technologist program. So he's a technical program manager at Intel, and he's been here for a few years. But Alex is someone who is very inspirational in their vision to share knowledge with others. And I think that you all would love to meet him. So hopefully you have an opportunity to do that in the future. So I'll skip over Alex for now. Sai. You're on mute, buddy.
I thought my headset would control it. But hey, everyone, I'm Sai. Originally from India, but I was raised in Westchester, PA, near Philadelphia. I'm a supply chain engineer right now, but my role is shifting to a dual kind of supply chain engineer, commodity manager like Hussein. I have an MBA in supply chain and operations is my concentration, along with a MS in mechanical engineering. So I have that dual technical commercial side knowledge. As you can see with my skills in tech, I've done a lot with my short career so far, with mobile app development, business, entrepreneurship, technical development. And I agree with Hussein on the learning portion. If you aren't growing, and if you aren't learning, then you aren't growing. And if you aren't growing, then you're not becoming a even better asset to not only the company, but to yourself. And that is the biggest thing I wish I knew in college is like, yeah, I'm taking all these courses, but that's not where my learning stops. That's not where my growing stops. My growing stops never. I have to keep doing things. So for me, if you guys have questions about human-centered design engineering, that's kind of focusing on your end user and developing products and technology, and the technical supplier management aspect of supply chain and Arizona. I've been in Arizona for a year now, and I've been exploring the whole area. That's part of what I do outside of Intel. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me, so we can move on to the next person.
Oh, I'm the next person. Well, I'm Marco. I'm actually from Mexico City. So I came to the US for my master's and PhD. And after that, I stayed here. I got this is actually my first job outside of the PhD. So I got hired to work at Intel, and I've stayed here since then. Well, I have a bachelor's in mechatronics, which is mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, and I have a master's and PhD in mechanical engineering. I did it on microfabrication, so Intel's a pretty good place for that, right? We make a lot of really small things. So what kind of like a skill set I do? Well, currently I'm a mechanical simulation engineer. What the heck does that mean? It means that people come with problems that are mechanical in nature, of like, oh, I'm trying to build this thing. We're putting together all these parts. Like, do things gonna work? So I put it in a computer, numerical method, and I'll get them a recommendation or an answer for what they need to do. So that's pretty much what I do. But in terms of skills and technologies, I do numerical simulation, but I'm also familiar with micro and fabrication methods of how to make chips. I'm also familiar with mechanical or statistical modeling too. And I did for a while heat transfer. So it was primarily how to cool the processors. I did that for a while. So you can ask me anything related to technology or science or whatever you want to know about that. And what is kind of like my advice that I wish I knew in college. So I kept studying a lot because, well, engineering is like that. It's hard to have to study, but you also have to leave enough time allocated for living your life. So probably living a little more. And your life is going to go and continue in parallel to whatever you do for work, academics, and you should be doing both at the same time. So get also time allocated for your life. So that would be my main advice or recommendation. So I probably I'll leave it here for the next speaker. I'm not sure who might be the next speaker. Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ruben Denway. I am an Intel supply chain engineer. So, but within Intel, it's called EDE, which stands for Equipment Development Engineer. I am from Dallas, Texas, but originally I'm from Jos, Nigeria. So I was born and raised in Nigeria until I was 19, moved to Texas. So I always have that bias towards Texas, right? Plus, it has a good barbecue, right? So, hey, can't hate that. That's my home. And academically, my background has always been in mechanical engineering. I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering and I did my master's in mechanical engineering. The type of master's I did is the Masters of Engineering, Mechanical Engineering. So for those who are not familiar with that, is that's a non-thesis master's. And for me, I chose that path because I knew I wanted to go into industry. So I wanted to focus on an industry-based master's. Some of my skills in technological background is design for manufacturing. That was my core focus during my master's program. Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, got to use that in some of my internships prior to landing at Intel at Air Products and John Deere. Also supply management. That was something I learned when I was at John Deere and currently is an integral part of my role at Intel. And also data analytics. An advice that I wish I had in knowledge kind of ties to learning, which is something Sai, Hussein, and Eva Marco talked on. It's like keep learning and build your skills not only based on current technology, because I know when I was in college, I was trying to focus on what is currently out there. But I also realized it's important to understand what is going to be coming in the future. That way one can pivot and learn the right information and advance his or her career. Something you can ask me is just like leveraging internships and turning them into full-time positions and opportunities in supply chain for engineers. The last one, because before joining Intel, I didn't know that engineers could find a place in supply chain, but there's a lot of opportunities out there. Nice to meet everybody.
All right, thank you, Ruben. Scott.
Hey, everyone. My name's Scott. I am originally from Winter Haven, Florida. It's about an hour south of Orlando, so lots of Disney trips. I am finishing up my PhD in electrical engineering at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and I recently moved out to Portland during the pandemic. So haven't really got that much chance to explore much of what's going on, but excited to be out here on the West Coast. For my job at Intel, I'm an SoC design engineer, which is the very high level overview that they give to pretty much any electrical engineer in the design team. My role is mostly focused on analyzing the different parts that come out of the fabrication facility. So say Intel produces, 10,000, 100,000 parts. Not all of those parts are going to be exactly the same. And my job is to create different binning strategies. That way we can create different parts, like if you're familiar with Intel products, the i7, i5, and i3. How much actually, or how many parts get allocated to each one of those products. For the skills and technologies, I didn't really put any, I put more high level, topics here. I didn't put quantum mechanics or anything like that. These things I felt are important for me in my career that have helped me move forward. Critical thinking, being able to ask questions about the different topics that are presented to you. Don't ever take anything, at face value. Ask questions, dig deeper. Coding fundamentals, especially for STEM careers. I think coding is one of the most important things that has really allowed me to do my job. And then being a quick learner, this takes practice. And I think this ties into some of the other panelists' comments about being a lifelong learner. As you learn more skills, you'll learn how to pick up different skills quicker. And I think that kind of ties together. Some career advice that I wish I knew in college. How to identify a good mentor versus someone who wants to be helpful. Identifying the right mentor for you is very difficult. And I think that, it can be very difficult even at a company like Intel to identify who is the right mentor for where you're trying to go to meet your goals. As for anything else to ask me about, pretty much anything, although I wrote down here anything related to an engineering profession, coding, technology trends. I also like to homebrew, and in my spare time, I do microcontroller projects, and pretty much anything else. All right, and that about sums up my my bio.
Thanks, Scott. And I believe Chloe is our last panelist.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chloe. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I actually started at Portland Community College. Prior to starting college, I was in a completely different field. I danced. I did ballet professionally for 15 years. So when I started college, it was a little bit more natural and comfortable going into community college just because you have people from all different backgrounds coming back to school, maybe just starting school. So I had a great experience at my community college, and then I transferred to Portland State to finish up my degree in chemistry. And I started at Intel in 2018 as a manufacturing technician. And I was in that position for about a year and a half. And then now I moved over to the Aloha campus, and I'm their module engineer on shift. So kind of like the first point of contact when things go wrong. Under skills and technologies, I put down SPC data analysis. We're the first point of contact for the technicians when lots fail on tools. We also work on different tool sets to create recipes for new products. So sometimes they want to change the scribe width of the laser tool or the thickness of the wafers on the thinning tools, and we're responsible for setting up those recipes. We also run design of experiments for the tool owners, which are kind of side projects that we do as well. And pretty much our job is process-focused troubleshooting. So as far as advice that I wish I knew in college, I was always kind of more introverted in college, and networking always seemed kind of like a big scary thing to me. But I think as I went through college, I learned that you don't have to do this big thing to network. You can just, have pleasant professional interactions with your teachers and your peers and your coworkers. And I think a large part of the reason I was able to get hired at Intel had to do with being in contact with some of my former classmates that had started there before me. So that's something that I wish I knew. And I think also if, you're new into the STEM field, like I wasn't in STEM at all prior to starting college, it can be a little bit intimidating or scary switching paths. But I think as long as you remember there's like an end at the light of the tunnel, colleges can be a grind, and it's not always super fun, but knowing that you have a career ahead of you is just good to keep you motivated along the way. As far as things you can ask me about, I tutored quite a bit during college, and I really enjoyed that. So any sort of tips for college success or resume advice, possible career opportunities, and then I'm a big foodie. So if you want to share your favorite restaurants, I always look forward to a recommendation. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chloe, and to all of the other panelists for giving some great introductions of yourself. Okay, awesome. And so when it comes to our panelists, I'm going to start us off with a few questions, but feel free to hop in and give some answers. And I think the goal is for these first few questions, we're looking to get about 2 answers apiece, and then from there we can let the conversation flow and just see where the students' questions take us. So at first, how did you select your career?
I'll go first. So basically from, it didn't happen overnight. From a young age, I really enjoyed working on computers, and I always found myself sitting in front of one, exactly like I am now. So it kind of was a natural progression for me to go to college for electrical engineering. And yeah, I think one important thing is to reflect on what you keep coming back to. If you like doing electronics projects, in my case, then I sit in front of a computer, and working at Intel is kind of a natural extension of that. So I think that's how I ended up selecting my career, is trying to do something similar to what I like to do outside of work.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Anyone else?
Well, I'll give it a try. I always liked science, so it was for me either like or engineering or physics. So it's kind of like, what do you like doing? And after that, you have to try that out, see if you like it. But I already had like a general idea of where I wanted to go. So it's like a STEM field is like I really like the idea of working on science and engineering. So at least that was my first step. Now specifically, what was towards mechanical or electrical engineering? I always like making drawings and working with like geometrical things. So something related to mechanics, like it was more was drawing me towards that. But I think it may have worked with some other engineerings that work with physical objects. So what I learned in life is that you have a natural tendency, but in terms of a job, like there's like 3-4 jobs that you're gonna be good for. It's not like there's 100% fit, right? And the attributes for your job keep evolving, so it's not that you're gonna be doing exactly the same all the time.
Awesome, thank you, Marco. So next question, and maybe we can talk about some positives and negatives of our current jobs, right? What we like and dislike.
I can start off. One thing that I really like is being able to, well, my role, I kind of work with not only people in Arizona or Oregon or California, I work with suppliers across the world, which is good and also a bad thing. Good in the sense that I get to discover and learn more about cultures and immerse myself into these new relationships with suppliers that I never thought I'd interact with in the past. Once Intel allows people to go on site and visit suppliers, I'll be going to South Korea to meet with one of my suppliers, get to know them in person and build that relationship. The bad part about that is I'm not a 9 to 5 anymore. I was my first day. I was working from 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. And that sometimes tends to happen with these international suppliers because you can't meet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with them. You have to meet and work with them on their times, and that's something that's reasonable for you. So that's one of the cons with what I do. Even though I work with some really cool technology, I still have to sometimes make some sacrifices in my social life or like change my schedule around to fit my suppliers' needs and my customers' needs. My customers are the factories that I work with and develop. So an example of changing my schedule is usually I'm a night owl. I've shifted that completely to where I go to the gym early in the morning instead. And then my night is now able to spend time with my roommates and focus on work if needed. If there's a task that I have to do, or if a factory is going to face lines down, I need to be there. I need to be online and working, trying to figure out a solution, no matter what, even if it's 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. So the hours is something that gets a little difficult, but the satisfaction you get from solving problems is what really motivates me and what really gets me excited about working with my suppliers.
And just to quickly follow up on that, I think one thing that I really like being an EDE is just the opportunity to interact with both the tools, which is the technical aspect, and then the suppliers, which is the human interaction. Personally, I had to ask myself, hey, who am I and what do I like? I know naturally I'm curious about the sciences, but I also enjoy with people. So enjoy engaging with people, and my job allows me the opportunity to do that. Now, another aspect of it that I like is the fact that you support in different locations, so the problems are new every day. There's no boredom. Then the part that is a little challenging, I wouldn't say I don't like it per se, is being an EDE and not being able to engage with the tools that I own. It's a little, it's kind of like a struggle, right? It's like somebody saying, hey, work on this car, but you're never going to get to see it or drive it. So that's the part that I wish I got a lot more interacting with the tools I manage.
Thanks, Ruben. Thanks, Sai. If you were to go back to the college what would you tell yourself, right? Are there any skills that you tell yourself to develop, or perhaps any thoughts or tidbits of advice?
So at least when I was in high school, I was super stressed out about what I was about to select as my career choice, right? So I was like, how do I know I'm going to like it? Well, the truth is that you don't know if you're going to like it till you actually are studying it or doing it. But it's not the end of the world. And you can try a couple of different things as you're going through it, as you're going through college. And the US has that facility that you can try a couple of things while you're in college. But also, even in a particular area, you have some amount of flexibility, right? As a mechanical or electrical engineering guy, you may as well work with people, but you may also work with numbers. So it depends of what floats your boat. So if you're struggling about that, out of school, you're going to have more flexibility than what you thought it was going to be. So you can figure it out still. So I don't think that careers evolve as humanity progresses. So there's no guarantee, or there's really not like 100% fit for you, right? So it's not like you're trying to solve that problem. And you can decide what you're going to be doing within engineering. There's people who are doing more management and deal with more people, and there's people who work more with numbers or with machines. So there's flexibility once you get out too.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that. I think a lot of times when you get your degree in a particular major, you get really set in like, oh, I can only do, this set of jobs. And I think it's good to remind yourself that like degrees in STEM are kind of transferable. Like I'm not doing any sort of lab work in my current job. And that was mostly what I did studying chemistry. So talking to your teachers, getting ideas, a lot of them have helped students in the past. And I think just reaching out to people and getting ideas will give you a broader sense of, what you're qualified for. So yeah.
I second that. Science and technology are fairly flexible.
Yeah, and I think one important aspect of that is that you don't really know until you go out and try it. So if you have the opportunity to do an internship wherever, I think that's very valuable if you're trying to go into the industry as opposed to academia. If you're trying to go into the industry, I would say just go do an internship somewhere, 3 months, see if you like it, and evaluate how you feel from there. I think we have a question.
Yeah, let's carry on with the audience questions now. Thanks, Scott, Shelby, Marco. Chloe, thank you.
The first audience question that I have is, and this kind of relates to something that someone was just saying earlier, does Intel hire mostly people with college degrees? And then what types of degrees do people at Intel often have?
I could speak to kind of my experience. So as a manufacturing technician, I've seen job requisitions posted where some of them only require an associate's degree. I've also seen some posted that require bachelor's. In the org that I joined, I think this might have changed, but they only required an associate's in some sort of STEM field. So one of my direct coworkers actually did a program at PCC that was 2 years long. I'm pretty sure it guaranteed him an interview at the end, not necessarily the job, but he got an interview, and from there he started. So the technician role, I don't know if a lot of people know that, but I also had a friend who had been in college for a long time. School was a little bit harder for him, and he already had his associates, was trying to get a bachelor's. And I said, hey, you already have the degree, requirements for this job. I think you'll really like it. You could try it out. And if you don't like it, you can go back to school. And he ended up applying and getting the job. So I think that is a good option if, say you don't want to get anything beyond an associate's. But most of the engineering positions require even like a graduate level degree. I'm kind of in a lower level engineer position. So my role only required a bachelor's, but most of the like tool owner roles and beyond on the technical side require at least like a master's.
So on that same topic, Intel is fairly large. Across the globe, we're about 100,000 people, 110,000, I think. So there's a huge range for the needs and the opportunities that it may entitle, right? There are specific groups in which you want to join because they're really research oriented or they require really specific skills that they are going to be looking for masters or PhD even. For most of the positions, I would say and some degree of engineering will be acceptable and there will be flexible, but I've seen certain groups that do require masters or PhD, like the group in which I am, which is pretty specific on what they need. The bulk of the 20 of us have PhDs, and probably a third have masters. But it's fairly specific as a group. It doesn't. It is not a reality of 110,000 people. So there's wide varieties of what you may want to do, see, or what they really require, right? Some other jobs, they only require a bachelor's, and that's it. But it really depends on what you want to do. And part of that is, if you really want to know for a specific thing, what I recommend you is to look around for the kind of jobs and what they require. Because if you're looking for something really, really specific, like the guy who makes the transistor, so there are really few, Intel only has few engineers that do the transistor, but they require PhDs, right? Because it's the most specialized thing that we do across the entire company. But there's plenty of, like, within 110,000 people, that's not the only thing that we do. Like, we manufacture a lot of things that is super useful. We sell stuff. So we also have engineers who also are good at selling things to people. And you don't require a PhD for that, to go and do that. You're required to understand some technical knowledge, but you don't require a PhD. So there's going to be what I'm trying to say is that there's going to be a bias to that question, specifically who's answering it.
And to add 2 quick tidbits before our next question, I myself have a bachelor's degree, but when I interned at Intel, I was interning for a bachelor's level internship. After the internship, I was offered a full-time job that requires an MBA. So there's also the level of merit that applies for certain positions, right? I wouldn't go into an engineering role without an engineering degree, but given that during my internship, I was able to prove that I could deliver a certain level and consistent cadence of performance and results, then I was able to justify with management to give me that MBA level position. So there are instances where those sorts of things happen, and definitely never sell yourself short. And the second thing I want to add is Intel also supports education reimbursement. So if you want to get your MBA, for example, through Intel, depending on your business unit, they'll offer up to support your MBA. Give this case and justification for why it is you're trying to pursue a specific academic path, right?
They also support secondary degrees in engineering, right? If you have a bachelor's and you want to do a master's on something that is related to engineering, they'll pay for a substantial amount of it, at least.
All right, so Lauren, do you want to ask the next question?
Sure, yeah. So I currently work as a manufacturing technician at Intel. I'm on my way right now. I work shift 6. So this is really interesting hearing some insights from the higher ups. Thank you all. My question is in regards to career changes. I don't know if I want to work in semiconductors forever. I might not. But I'm curious if any of you have gone through a career change within the engineering profession that, say, took you from something else into Intel, and what that change was like, what helped, and yeah, any insights that you might have on big career changes within engineering.
Yeah, I can totally help with that. So, Lauren, nice to meet you first of all. I started my entire career as an intern as an SAP app developing intern. So I went from mobile app development to Norfolk Southern, actually working in the railroad industry, doing process improvement there, working these weird hours for one whole semester during my co-op program. I actually worked third shift. So I was working 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then after that, I had another internship with SAP, more so on the analytics side, so working on the business side. So I've done those career shifts already in my career. And from job role to job role, you learn tangible things. You learn problem solving, you learn critical thinking skills, you learn how to deal with the ambiguity that you see in the business world. Because if you take a look at, take a textbook engineering problem, you're given all these constants, you're given all these variables, you're given all this information just written in the word problem. That's not how it is in the real world. And one of the things that's super transferable from all of those 4 positions that I just mentioned was thinking critically and thinking, okay, so it's safe to make, I know I can make this assumption based off of this information that I've found off of this website or this company's information. The shift each time for me was easier because I ruled something out that I didn't want to do. I started with coding and I was like, I'm good at this, but I don't like it. Like, I can project manage coding projects, but I don't want to be there at my laptop always trying to figure out debugging something. And then when I worked in Norfolk Southern, I was like, yeah, I like being on the floor and I like looking at these giant locomotives, but the cultural environment here is not what I want. It is all work, no play. So that helped me narrow it down further. And then when I went back to SAP and did analytics, that's when I realized that, hey, in order to be a good engineer, I need business background. So then I got my MBA. And then that led me to picking Intel because I had an interest in technology and always growing technology. And that's why I applied for an internship through my graduate school program. And then from there, I jumped into working at Intel. So ruling things out helps you decide, ruling things out helps you change careers. And also knowing what you're picking up from each of those jobs or each of those positions helps you because you can then say, so I've learned this problem solving skill and this is how I can apply it now in this new position that I'm applying for now or that I'm interviewing for now. So knowing those 2 things can make it really powerful and make it really easy for you to transition from a different type of engineering role to a new one.
Yeah, and I'll add on a little bit to that. In my short time at Intel, I've only been with Intel for maybe 8 months or something like that. I have seen other people transition from very different roles into, my team and away from my team. And I think it's very common for, people inside Intel to, start off in manufacturing maybe, and then move to a coding role or maybe, vice versa. And there's not to make this like a sponsored pitch or anything like that, but there's a lot of roles inside of Intel where you can kind of find what you enjoy, whether it's coding, manufacturing, the physical aspect. So yes, each of those has their own opportunities, but it is very common to see that transition from what I've seen.
I had one thought that I wanted to mention because you already work at Intel. So I don't know if you've seen, I think it's called something different now, but it used to be called DOT. They're like temporary assignments that you can do within like a different org. And I think you work with your manager to set that up. But if you go into Workday, I believe you can access it there. And I think that is probably a good resource you could use since you're already, working at Intel. I don't know if you've used that before or looked into it, but maybe worth looking into.
Yeah, and for context for the audience, Workday is an internal platform that employees use at Intel. It's where we look at, salary info, pay stubs, but there's also growth opportunities there. That's where you find the jobs that are available within the company. And in this case, what Chloe's referring to, it used to be called DOT, Development Opportunity Tool. Now it's called Gigs. So we can create jobs for temporary roles on different teams, and employees can apply to them if they want to get a taste of a different sort of job, right? And you interview with the hiring manager, and you make that commitment work with your manager.
And also sometimes your manager just tells you that you're moving teams. That happened to me about a month ago. So I switched from an equipment engineer to a media engineer. So for those of you who don't know, media is the trays that go into that hold the product that go through all the tools. So I got blindsided by that and I was told of a change. So sometimes you just have to deal with the change too. But you gotta take it with pride and take it with like, hey, I'm gonna learn something new from this. So let's do it.
Thank you all. We have another question from Elsa.
Hello. I just have a question about is there any hint or any something special when you apply for jobs? So my husband is 50 plus years old. So he applied for Intel a couple times, and he has master's degree in business and chain supply. He working like has a big experience in chain supply manufacturing, and he has a Sigma 6 belt project management. I know he always like learning everything what you're talking about. He like always reading, always learning, exploring, and get some certification update. But he get into the position when he was like the last interview where they choose between two people, but he never been chosen. And I assume maybe because it's age issue. And right now, like I look at you, they're all young people here.
Well, I will say that I think Hussein chose this panel for specifically the panelists for people who are very new to Intel.
Yeah. This specific panel, when I had selected contestants and worked that out, we wanted people who were less than 5 to 7 years within their career. So naturally, that is going to lead to the people who look like us. But I will say this. There are some things that unfortunately can't be controlled in hiring processes. And it's, hiring processes are always being reformed and always being looked at again and again by employers to figure out ways to make them more inclusive for people that are coming from all different types of backgrounds, right? The only advice that I can give without specific insight into your husband's situation is Intel is an organization that very much appreciates quantified experience. So having the experience is one thing, but it requires a great deal of knowledge in your specific background to quantify the experiences, the results that you've delivered, and not only the results that you've delivered, but how do you plan on delivering those results in an even greater capacity in such a large company like Intel, right? Especially in a role like supply chain management, a lot of it really isn't about delivering results. It's about collaborating with others to help influence them and deliver results, right? It's a very collaborative, customer-facing role. So I guess off the top of my head, that's some insight that I could provide as someone who works in supply chain myself.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like they have all the experience that they need. Like getting to that point where you are like the decision between one or another is, that means that they are qualified and ready to be there. And I don't have any particular advice, but what I'd say is that maybe look up some people on LinkedIn, try and now with COVID it's not that popular, but like networking events just like this, making connections, and trying to get that in of finding an internal position. Intel likes to hire a lot of internal people. So it makes it difficult externally to find those open jobs. So networking, LinkedIn, message those managers of the groups that they're interested in, and that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
I have a question from the chat. How do we manage working in an internship while maintaining high grades and having a part-time job to support ourselves? So I guess it's kind of a time management question for you.
Not pop on this. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So actually this hits really close to home for me because throughout my entire grad school, I interned part-time as to help pay for grad school and pay for rent because those aren't free. One of the things that have really helped me is sticking to a set schedule and making sure that in those breaks that I have between classes, I'm either doing something for work or I'm doing something for school, making sure that I'm making the most of my time and making a to-do list. I never made them in undergrad because I was like, all right, I'm always on top of everything. And then I hit grad school doing 2 degrees and doing an internship. And I was like, all right, there's too much. So having a to-do list and crossing things off, making sure that you're hitting allowing yourself to hit those deadlines in a comfortable pattern, I think really helped me with juggling grad school and part-time work. At the same time, I haven't done part-time work, grad school, and an internship at this all three at once. I don't know how that would happen for me, but one of that really helps, and making sure that you still have time for yourself, because you need to take care of your mind and your body. You need to find time to, either if it's going to the gym or if it's just taking 5 minutes in between classes to go on a mental health walk or just to relax, get away from your screen or something like that. You need to prioritize your mental health, because you can't put out good quality work in any of those three things that you mentioned, your part-time job, school, or your internship, without a good, healthy mindset. So making sure you make time for yourself, as well as creating that to-do list and creating action plans every week of what you're going to do and how you're going to accomplish it, will really help you get that time management down to a T. And the other thing with that is you're going to make sacrifices. There were nights that people would be going to happy hours or be going out to the bars and celebrating stuff, and it's like, I can't do that because I have other commitments along with my schoolwork that I have to hit, and I have to make those sacrifices because that is where my career is going to go, or where my life is headed. So being okay with saying no to certain things as well, because your health comes first too. So yeah, that's my take on that.
So people take internships for two different reasons. One of them is they want to try out what it is to work in that specific field. And the other reason is for people to know you within the company. If you're going to be juggling 2 or 3 things at a time, it will be really hard for you to deliver on the specific project. So I wouldn't advise like overcommitting there, because if you want to have people who know you and they know that you do really good work, you have to allocate enough time for you to be successful. And I've had a couple of interns working with me, and what I try to do is to ensure that they have enough time for the project that they are working on to be successful. And at the end of the day, that their project is known for, or they're known because of the project, and the project was good enough that, or a pretty good piece of work, such that people know them. And whenever they're applying for a job and people are looking for, oh, I did an internship, why don't you ask the guy I was working with how good really I am, right? So then he has to good points to provide feedback to whoever might be responsible for hiring. So allow time for you to be successful and to have a life together, right? So that's why I recommend summer is better, because you're going to be only doing that, and you're going to have a little bit of time to leave on the side, right?
And I'd like to add to to the points that they both made, which is pretty great. So time to Sai's point of breaking down activities into like plan of actions. One thing I noticed that kind of helped me when I was doing my full-time internship and also going to school full-time in grad school was compounding those activities, right? So sometimes I'll find a group of activities and think, hey, which group of activities can I attack and complete with the least amount of action? So if I can do things at the same time and multitask and get it done, I will do it. Now, the second thing is prioritizing. When I was doing my internship during my last semester, I was thinking about it. Okay, ideally, everybody wants to get an A. But, like Marco mentioned, it's hard to deliver on everything. I had to prioritize. I knew if I delivered on my internship and had a good reputation, that will afford me a job. And if I get a B in the class, it's not going to hurt my GPA. So I had to figure out, okay, what am I going to do to get a B? And how much hours am I going to dedicate to ensure that I knock out this internship to the point where I had an excellent performance? And at some point, you have to do that juggling act to find out what you prioritize and how to achieve that.
Add one more question from the chat, and then I think we have a couple people with their hands up. So this next chat question is, does anyone recall a time when they felt like they were failing, either in college or in their career, and how they overcame that feeling?
I'll add my thoughts on this. I feel like if you're in that position, as occasionally I feel like it's important to follow like general steps, make a list, define your first step, and move forward from there. So it's not that, I haven't been in my position long enough to say like my career is failing, but you can feel stress on your job. And I think it's just important to mentally get your head around the things that are in front of you that you need to accomplish, and then taking the first step to getting those things resolved.
Yeah, I have an example specific to school. I remember I was in my third term of physical chemistry, and we had our first midterm, and it was the first test I didn't finish the test. Like, the time ran out, and I was like, okay, there's no way I'm getting an A because some of the questions aren't even answered. And I mean, it was scary because that class was heavily weighted towards exams. There wasn't a lot. He didn't give any extra credit, I don't believe, and we didn't have homework graded. So, I mean, a large part of my grade was going to be affected by this test. So in that case, I really evaluated how I studied for that test. And I remember before we had the exam, he very specifically pointed out problems that were going to show up on the test. And I just redid every single homework problem before the test, which wasn't a very effective way to use my time. And it ended up that a lot of those questions weren't even on the test. So just kind of evaluating the methods you used, either before tests, for example, or, leading up to a project, and shifting that around, to get better results. The second test I did much better on. I really paid attention to what questions he pointed out, and yeah, just evaluating your methods and how you got to where you were, I think is important.
Great. So our next question is from Chloe.
Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. I am currently co-enrolled at Clackamas Community College and Portland State University, and I'm hoping to get my Bachelor's of Science in Quantitative Economics. And I've looked into Intel at some of the financial analyst career options, and I was just curious if you guys had, I know that's different than what your guys' career focus is, but if you guys had any just general tips or guidance towards getting an internship in a field like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to that. I think from the commercial perspective, even though I work in supply chain, the finance interview track process and the supply chain interview track process very much flow hand in hand. So like any career in business, a lot of the interview is focused on behavioral questions, right? So how do you handle conflict? How do you handle disagreements with either your manager or your management chain, as well as your direct link of coworkers? From there, they prioritize a great deal of knowledge, especially at Intel, on scenario-based questions for finance, right? So if I were to ask you a question about, I have this much obsolete inventory in this area, and these are the financial implications of it, and someone else is trying to buy it, how would you go about evaluating that scenario, right? So they really want you to be able to pick apart a question and showcase your entire thought process from A to Z, right? Sometimes, depending on the interview, even if it's in person, they might have you step up to a whiteboard and demonstrate an entire flow chart of your process, right? That is something that they will do for finance roles. That is something that they do in many cases for engineering roles. So being able to think out loud is a critical skill, especially within a business-oriented role.
One thing to add to that, actually, Hussein and I have talked about this one-on-one before. Case interviews. Case interviews are something you should look into to prepare yourself for any type of business role. We don't have much time, so I don't want to explain it all, but write down the phrase case interviews, Chloe, and start looking into them and read about them. They'll come in really handy. And if you have questions, you can probably find me on LinkedIn and you can reach out and we can talk about it too. I've done a couple, so just read into them. And then if you do have questions, reach out. Yeah.
I'll leave you with one question to think about. How would you break apart the cost of a water bottle?
All right, great. Thank you both so much. I'll take all that into account. And yeah, maybe add you on LinkedIn if I have any further questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you all. Stephen is our next student with a question.
Hi, everyone. So I just had a question specifically on based on the scale and scope of Intel, what is the cultural environment for a first-year grad engineer coming in? What are expectations or on-the-job trainings? What does that look like?
Yeah. So when you say first year engineering, like right out of like you graduated and that's first year, or like you're doing your first year of engineering in school and now you're doing your first internship?
Exactly. Just to the point earlier, you guys, you kind of got to get into the job to see what it's like. You don't really know what you like. Why would I apply at Intel my first year when I graduate?
Sure.
What's the culture look like? What's the development look like? The challenges, so on.
Yeah. So I'm in the engineering side of supply chain, and one of they want you to grow at your own pace. And really, I didn't take leadership into I didn't start owning projects and owning suppliers until about month 2 of my time at Intel. So I spent a lot of time growing and learning, picking up things, talking to experienced supply chain engineers, pulling their best known methods, we call those BKMs at Intel, on how to be a good supply chain engineer. And they allow you to do that. Like my manager gave me 5 contacts and said, hey, these are all great supply chain engineers that I've worked with in the past. Use them as resources. They are happy to help you. They want you to grow. Whatever question you think is dumb is probably not dumb. And they probably had that question when they started. So they're really open to working with you and helping you grow. I scheduled I spent about 5 hours in meetings with those 5 individuals, just asking questions, being like, hey, I'm dealing with this situation. How do I react? How do I handle it? It's a very learning mentality those first 3 months. And then they expect you to apply what you've been learning this whole time and continue to take what you learn from those mistakes that you make as you take ownership of things. So I enjoyed the onboarding process a lot because I was able to make some mistakes and then say, hey, what would I have done differently? And how can I do it differently with my next supplier, with my next project with the supplier? Another big selling point for first year engineers is that you have the flexibility after your first year and a half or so to move from role to role really easily. You can go from doing R&D into doing supply chain and focusing on technology development, or you can go right into spares and think about how to and work on the spare side of things. How do we improve our spares gaps or days of inventory gaps and whatnot? So you start off in one place, but your entire career could go somewhere else, and you don't know until you start.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that that there is 110,000 people at Intel. Not all of them are going to be your best manager. Every group is different. What I would suggest is that if you end up doing an internship at Intel and you like your manager, try really hard to get back into that group. And there's opportunities to move around, but really the culture is good. The culture is really good. There's a huge emphasis on learning. There's a lot of resources to get you ramped up. Generally, everyone in your group and adjacent groups is willing to spend time with you to teach you about what they do. And that's a great way to build resources and connections. But I think the most important first step is, if you don't want to go, and just get a full-time position straight up, do an internship, 3 months, even if you have graduated, just try and get a 3-month internship, dip your toe in the water, and see what you like, see if you like the manager.
Okay, thank you guys.
Looks like we are. I have a question from the chat, which is, given that Intel is worldwide, were there any specific opportunities, or what was it about Portland that brought you to work at Intel?
That's where my job posting was.
I don't work in Portland, actually. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Likewise.
Same.
Yeah. So I actually, when I interned here, I'm a very avid outdoors person, and I came to Arizona and I was just like, I'm in. Look at this. It was hot weather, but like, look at all this nature around me. I got to be here. As you can tell, I'm a very tropical person and I like warmer climates. So I just was sold on it. Like the first 3 weeks, I went to Sedona and I was like, all right, I'm in. I went to the Grand Canyon. I'm in. So the location really helped the decision. For me, at least. The only bad thing that happened in my internship was my AC broke, cost some money. But other than that, I loved Arizona the first time here, and now I'm here full time, and I still love it.
And to add to that, I was going to say, for me, besides the hot weather, I had the option to go to California, but then I looked up the rent. And I was like, okay, not anymore.
Yeah. I'll say that, to Ruben's point, a couple of things to consider is you want to, when you're looking at salaries for roles, right, you want to see how much the company will adjust salary based on where it is you're going. So depending on the role, Intel will compensate you 25 to 30% more to go to California. But if the cost of living is 40% more, then you got to be willing to take a 10% salary hit, depending on your job, to live in Cali, right? So now when you take small details like that into consideration, it helps narrow down where you want to be. And for me specifically, I looked at it from a very technical standpoint and said, Intel's R&D center is in Oregon. So if I want to be as close as I can to the newest technology that's being developed for just my own learning, then Oregon is the place to be for me. And then on top of that, Arizona is too hot for me. But then from the other angle, I also looked at it one step further outside of Intel and said, Portland isn't too far from the Bay Area and Cali. So for future career opportunities, if I ever wanted to leave Intel and pursue an opportunity with another tech company, it may be easier for me to network being from Portland, right? So those are some of the other aspects that I thought of when deciding to move, from New Jersey across the country to Oregon.
Telling your boss, you're saying.
And my what?
I'm telling your boss that you're looking up other opportunities in San Francisco.
You stay hungry, stay foolish, man. Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Always stay ready.
Well, I think this next question from the chat actually is a nice segue. Other than LinkedIn and our professors, how can we establish professional connections? So what are some other networking tools that people use?
Informational interviews. Go ahead, Marco.
So other than LinkedIn and their professors is the people you're studying with. Like they're going to go all over the place and you better keep in touch with them because you have known them for years. So these are people who can recommend you. Most companies have an internal recommendation system. They get your CV, they put it through the system, and it goes to the upper part of the pile. So they're at least going to be looking at it. So the people who you get along with during your bachelor's, they might be able to help you in the future to get a job in the company they're working. And you can also ask them, like, oh, how is it to work for company A, B, C, or D if they're working inside? And they can help you out to move around. Also, your coworkers, if they decide to also move, then probably you should keep in contact, right? There's also conferences, too, that you may have, like, connections or people that are have a similar minds or attitudes, right?
Yeah, and I know that going to conferences helped me a lot, but I will say that is probably, it is a pretty expensive option because conferences cost money. But yeah, I think probably the best way to get connections and find opportunities is definitely through LinkedIn. And I know everyone harps on it, but just add all your classmates and you will see how many of either your first connections or second connections work for the company that you might be interested in.
I also don't know how cool the Portland University area is with people from different colleges joining in on their career fairs or like networking events. But I went to school in Pittsburgh, but I would sneak into Carnegie Mellon career fairs or networking events and say, hey, here I am. I'm here. So like, yeah, I don't go to CMU, but I go to the University of Pittsburgh, check out my skills. So I would still try to finesse my way into other universities' events just to throw my name out there, because there were some companies that weren't recruiting at the University of Pittsburgh, but they were at CMU. And that's a walk away from the University of Pittsburgh. So just put on my suit and then just walk over. It worked. It would work sometimes, and other times I would be asked to leave. But hey, you got to try a couple times at least. So being involved and aware of local events that are happening is really good too. Because let's say you're into, I know this is STEM, but let's say you're into the arts, and there's a local art festival going on. You want to go there because you want to see the art there and you want to meet new artists. It's the same thing for any subject matter that you're interested in, biology, and you see a local research symposium going on. Just see if you can get in there for free as a student. As a student, you get a lot of perks, so you always got to see if you can finesse those kinds of things for either cheap or free.
You can also, for those of you that want to go on to pursue a bachelor's in undergrad, a lot of universities, you can volunteer in a lab. You'll work with graduate students, professors, and I think that's a good way to get exposure and see if you like research at all, and also just network a little bit more. So.
I have one last question from the chat. So if people can hang out for a few minutes, we will get through all the questions. So the question is, I really liked what Hussein said about being able to talk out loud and work out your process and be able to give a detailed explanation. How can someone practice and improve on those skills?
Well, when I first started doing it for my Intel interview, right? Even after my internship, they made me re-interview after the internship to get a full-time job because it was a different grade level, right? So grade level, for those of you who don't work at Intel, it's your experience level, or it affects your compensation, the scope of your work, etc. So I went in front of a mirror. I'd FaceTime my girlfriend. I'd send her a list of questions, and I'd just bounce I bounced them off of her, right? And I also think that's a great way to do it. Try, especially for business-facing roles, try an interview with someone who has an entirely different career path from you. My girlfriend's she's studying to be a dentist, so she doesn't know 90% of the stuff I talk about when I talk about supplier relationship management and score strategy and sourcing implementation. It all goes over her head. So if I can't explain it in a way where she's able to retain some of that information, then I am not simplifying it to the greatest extent. And that's a learning lesson, right? So practice makes perfect, of course. There are many different resources online that you can use, like Glassdoor. Blind is a platform that you can use once you get a job and you have a company email address. People post interview questions there all the time for different companies that you're trying to apply for. So practice, understand what the culture of the organization is. Some cultures very much prioritize simple answers, and they only want you to move forward with a question and give greater detail if they ask, right? So if they probe you, they want the answer. Other organizations, they want you to lay it all out on the table from the very beginning. Intel is very much like that, right? A very process-focused organization. So understand the company that it is you're applying for, and that'll help you through the interview process. Ultimately, the last piece of advice I could give is network with people who work in the role, right? When I was trying to prepare for my Intel interviews, I found people who worked at Intel and went to other companies on LinkedIn. I reached out to them. I scheduled, coffee discussions if they lived nearby me, or just virtual talks. And I use that as an in to understand, if I'm trying to work in this specific part of the company, what is it that I need to know? Because they're going to throw curveballs at you during the interview, and you need to be prepared.
And one book that I have read and I would recommend, you can easily Google it and find a PDF for free. So I know every college student's balling on a budget. So it's called Case in Point. And this is a book that focuses solely on the case interview portion of your interview. So that critical thinking and asking the right questions when you're given a question. In my interview for Intel, one of the questions I got actually from another company as well while I was interviewing was something along the lines of how many pianos are in Chicago. Now, if you actually know the answer to that question, I'll give you the rest of my salary for the year. but there's no way that you can pull that question out. You can answer that question in 2 minutes. So this book kind of talks about how to take those types of really crazy questions and to showcase your thinking capabilities, because they don't really care about the answer that you're getting. They care about how you're thinking. And when you think out loud and when you talk to people, that is how you talk about your thought processes. Example, I learn every day about finance and supply chain through my roommate, and we talk things out all the time, and we take things back when we say things because we realize that what we're saying doesn't make sense. And that's what helps us improve when it comes to critical thinking, because then we say, oh, wait, hold on. Let me take a pause at it. Let me say something different, because what I just said, when I think about it, doesn't make sense. So being able to accept when you don't know how to react or how to do things is also important with that. But learning how to tackle these weird questions is really going to be important, because they're not asking for an answer. They're asking for your thought process. I'll put the book that I mentioned in the chat too. If you look up PDF right after the title, you should be able to find it.
Thanks, Sai.
Quickly before we leave, we have a room for one thought. I'm just going to say one thing I've learned during my interviews, like don't be scared to ask clarifying questions sometimes during your thought process. Because I know sometimes we think, hey, I don't want to ask these questions and come up looking dumb. And then we rush into it and give answers that end up having a backfire effect. There's no harm in taking a pause for a second or two and asking great questions that can help you answer the question more accurately. That's it.
All right. I want to thank our panelists for taking the time to share a lot of knowledge and, give us a lot of useful information. I think a lot of students and a lot of people in the audience might have made some new friends. It sounds like people are already starting to do some social media checks, and we've got, requests for information all over the place. So again, thank you for volunteering your time and your knowledge and sharing that with our audience. There was one question that did not get answered, and I'm just going to answer it because it's a very good question to close on. And it was a question about how can I figure out what career I should pursue? And to be honest, a good place to start is by checking in with our STEM advisors and looking at the STEM EFA information. So I will put a link to the website that will take you to the Find Your Focus area. And it kind of walks you through the process of how you can see if STEM is a good fit for you. It also has the contact information for two of our two STEM advisors, Carrie Sandberg and Kimberly Hildebrandt Faust. So you can contact those people. And again, this is a great way to figure out if this is the path you want to start thinking about. And it also can connect you to some of the other different options that are out there for the college. And if you're really, 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 really interested, check out Eric Lee and Jennifer Bound's class. They have a STEM EFA class that I believe they're going to be running in the fall. So you can get some actual hands-on discussions of these types, like you got to hear today, learning about the engineering jobs that are out there. You'll get to do that as part of that STEM EFA course. So I would encourage people to check that out. Again, thanks everybody for your time. And for all the students out there, you probably need to go and do some studying and some time management like these guys have been talking about. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And thanks for coming to our last STEM Talk of the Year, everyone.